Seeing Beyond the Brain's Perspective, posted on February 6, 2012. If there is no space in you beyond the perspective of ego, it makes you a very shallow person with no depth in your view of life. All forms of racism, intolerance, abuse, superiority complex, and inferiority complex arises from a total identification with the ego's point of view without any connection with the space of life. The brain's perspective is what I call the ego's perspective. The brain creates a structure of ego based on its sense of self and its surroundings. Your name, gender, culture, country, family, history, possessions, status, physical looks, mental ability can all become the identities used to build your ego structure in the brain. You can imagine how narrow the brain's perspective can be when it has so many idea-based or label-based identities and beliefs. Most of it is just external conditioning. Of course, the brain's perspective has a value, and it also serves a practical purpose of giving a structure to your life. It's important to have a physical sense of identity in this world, which makes it convenient to organize things. However, if the brain's perspective is all you have, it constitutes a shallow experience of life and eventually does lead to some intense suffering. Most of your psychological suffering can be traced back to the fact that you're holding on to some narrow egoic view by believing some deluded and misguided perceptions or interpretations of the brain. The brain is good for practical purpose. It's a useful tool. It has the capacity for mechanical intelligence and memory, which serve a very important role in engaging in physical life. But if you're dependent on your brain to give you a sense of security and wholeness, you're totally looking in the wrong place. The brain is not the place you look for wholeness. The wholeness comes from your connection with the space of being. Of course, the brain also does come into a balance when you connect with your being. When I say connect with the space of your being, it's simply a pointer and something in you can easily recognize what it means if you don't try to overanalyze it. You can't know what's right for you. The brain has several ideas about what's right for you based on its limited vision. When you don't get what your brain felt was the right thing to happen, you start feeling angry towards life. This is why most of your suffering comes from being identified with the brain's perspective alone. If you can develop the maturity to realize that the brain doesn't really have the bigger picture, and hence can never know what's the best deal for you, there's a sense of trust in life and an openness to allowing life to orchestrate the events rather than clinging to a narrow view of the ego and brain of what should be happening. The brain can create desires, visions, and preferences, but there also needs to be a space in you to allow for leeway in life to bring forth the realities which are truly harmonious for you in sync with the totality. It's all about being in sync with the wholeness of life rather than just being rooted in a narrow egoic perspective. You can look at the brain's desires and preferences as the blueprint which it passes on to life. This blueprint is not the final copy. The final copy is prepared from the holistic vision of your life stream, which is in sync with the totality and hence has the bigger picture. The final copy created in your life stream is always way better and way more harmonious than the blueprint created by the brain. If you stay in a place of openness, without judging the events that happen, you'll soon see the order and harmony inherent to life stream, which always functions from a deeper wisdom. Life is not chaotic. It's only the brain in its limited vision that imagines it to be so. The ego, in its arrogance, feels it knows what's right for it, but there needs to be some openness to realize that it's not possible for your brain to know beyond a limited vision, mostly created out of conditioning or some past experiences. So don't be too hasty in believing the ego's perspective. Allow for it to be there, but don't be too identified with it. The attitude of openness. When you're questioning, why is this happening, or why did this happen, it has a value if you use this inquiry to look within for patterns of resistance or conflict in you. But if you use this inquiry to blame life or to feel that it's screwed up in some way, it just increases your resistances and negativity. Life is always trying to give you the best deal for your growth, maturity, expansion. The only problem is that many of us are too resistant to allow it. We hinder our own well-being by developing huge resistances within us through identification with negativity. You don't really need to try and remove the negativity, because the brain which created the negativity hardly has the intelligence to remove the negativity. Rather, if you can just stay in a place of allowing by becoming fully open to what arises in and around you, the emotions, the thoughts, and the events, soon you automatically start coming into harmony. Scientifically, this happens because the natural pull of life is towards wholeness, which is its natural vibration. And hence, when you let go and stay open, you easily get pulled into this wholeness. It's like releasing the hold on a rubber band. It automatically comes to a non-stressful state. Staying in a place of letting go feels like losing control, but in truth, it brings you to a place of true control where you're no longer being pulled around by the vacillating perspectives of your ego and brain. You're no longer a prisoner to your ego. This is when you realize what true freedom is.